here we go.
Welcome to the 9 Route Fantasy Football Podcast.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back into the 9 Route Fantasy Football Podcast. Pat and Scott winding down Wild Card Weekend for, maybe some daily fantasies or some of those postseason fantasy type contests that you might get into. We take a little bit of a step back from the regular season fantasy football and get into the playoff matchups and talk about a little prognostication, who we think is going to be the winner based off of, for entertainment purposes, only the money line, the spread, the over-under, and talk about the games and the matchups, just to kind of give you a little bit of a insight into what we look at sometimes when we make our picks and our calls for players of the week, starts and sits and things like that. It was an entertaining weekend. A lot of points scored. I know we were a little back and forth with that concept. No bad weather in San Fran, and last night was a little bit of a climactic or anticlimactic finish, depending on how you look at your side of Cincinnati, Baltimore. And we have one game to play as we record. It has not started yet. Later this evening will be the Dallas Cowboys at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers for the right to go to San Francisco and play for next week, the last game Sunday night in the divisional matchups. Those final four games, 8 teams left. Pat, how was your week and what's new? What's going on?
Yeah, man. Week itself was same old as every other week, but this weekend we had some really good games. Aside from that first, game of the weekend where things kind of got a little out of hand at the end of the game between the Seahawks and the 49ers. All the other games were one-score games. We saw, one of the greatest comebacks in playoff history this weekend, and they were really good games. I actually had the opportunity this weekend to pretty much watch every single one of them from start to finish. So that was nice. I don't always get that, with responsibilities and kids and stuff like that. So very interested in watching all of these games and did really well, honestly, in picking these games. And like you said, we don't necessarily encourage betting. We don't discourage it either on this podcast, but I did make a couple bucks on these games. A lot of my predictions, as we're going to see here when we review our picks from last week, a lot of my predictions were on. So good weekend for me altogether. I know that you were working a little bit here and there. I said a little bit. I don't know anybody that works as much as you do, honestly, but definitely got a chance to check in on the games you said at work, and even called or text me and made a last minute switch. Didn't really pay off for you though, unfortunately, huh?
Yeah, no, I was biting on some of the news reports that the weather was, you couldn't play football in San Francisco. The weather was so bad, and every time I walked by the TV, it looked like a nice spring summer day, sunny, beautiful out there in California. You can't beat the weather, right? So yeah, that's my own fault for not sticking and kind of him on a little bit there. So, but it is what it is. Yeah, it's Seattle looked like they had a pretty decent shot throughout the game, and that whole third time's a charm concept came back to roost in a couple of these games. But yeah, come the fourth quarter, San Francisco just kind of took it up a notch, it looks like. And Seattle had nothing left for them. But like you said, the games themselves very, very close. And yeah, that one a little close to your heart and mind was seeing Doug Peterson lead his team coach wise, making gutsy calls, big balls Doug. Got triple running back and Etienne taking off. It just had, little shades of Philly where you got to get creative and make that defense think twice. And I know that game alone was one where, we saw the matchup and kind of looked at it and said, yeah, I don't think the Chargers have enough for Jacksonville. And then again, I was running around. I saw it was like 27-7. And I was like, I guess we kind of missed the boat on this one. And yeah, I mean, literally through the, my ride home and getting out of the shower and just listening. And right after Dicker had missed that field goal, it seemed like that fully swung the momentum.
Yeah.
And Trevor Lawrence was able to shake off the 4 picks, of which one was tipped, which is, it's hard to sometimes throw that on the quarterback. And the other was a great diving catch. There were the 2 that were legit just thrown to the wrong guy at the wrong time. But, Chargers couldn't capitalize on everything. And at the end of the day, their defense let them down. I mean, they gave up all those points. It was 24-3 in the second half. So Brandon Staley might be rooming with Cliff Kingsbury sooner than later, but he'll probably get a pass because it was his first playoff game.
Yeah, they well, we're gonna dive into these games. So real quick before we start, let's just go over a few things, and then we'll just get right into the games because I feel like we're already talking about them. So don't forget, during the Pro Bowl week, we are going to do our fantasy awards. Please make sure that you follow us on social media so that you can vote on those awards. Our Twitter handles are at the 9route1 and at Scott from Delco. You can also check out our awards. We're going to put them up on the website, our award nominees. Our website is www.the9routeffb.com. And if you'd like to email the show, get in touch with us. We are at the 9routeffb@gmail.com. We're also going to total up and reveal our weekly head-to-head matchups, the start sits that we did throughout the season. We're going to give you those numbers during that Pro Bowl week as well. But let's jump into this wild card weekend since, like we said, we're already talking about the games. We obviously have a lot to get over and then, obviously go over next week's games as well. So just a quick recap. The wild card weekend, I went 12-3. Scott, you went 8-7. Would have been 10-5 had you not changed your. I'm sorry, you would have been 9-6 had you not changed your Seahawks pick there. But both of us had pretty good weeks above 500, so that's good. There is obviously still one game pending tonight, so you could close the gap there, or widen it depending on how the Cowboys and Bucs game shake out tonight. But let's jump a little bit into the wild card recap. Talked about San Francisco and Seattle already. Just a couple of quick, if you were in daily fantasy, some of the top performers. DK Metcalf, 13 targets, had 10 receptions for 136 yards. For the Seattle Seahawks, Christian McCaffrey went 15 for 119 and no touchdowns on the ground. Did have 2 receptions for 17 yards and a touchdown as well. And Brock Purdy, who, this kid is really, really impressive. Every game that you see, you just think is he going to crumble? Is it going to get too big for him? This being his first playoff game, the doubts were there. I definitely doubted, his abilities to, take this team and take this offense to. They were I think they were the highest scoring offense of the week. I think they scored, 41 points. So Purdy went 18 of 30 for 332 yards and 3 touchdowns. He's really, he's making a case for himself to be the starter next year. We're not there yet, but there's a point where. Jimmy Garoppolo could be healthy enough to come back and start. And if you're Kyle Shanahan, how do you take Brock Purdy out at this point? He's won his first 6 starts. He's looked really, really good in every single one of them. I don't think you can go back to Garoppolo. I think you have to at this point, you have to ride this out with Purdy, especially if he starts and wins another game next week.
And, you're saying Jimmy Garoppolo, Pat, don't forget Trey Lance. That's the other shoe to drop is, you invested a top 5 pick, made some trades to get this guy in. And, obviously a serious injury derailed his whole season. What do they do? If this kid turns around and comes out to be, basically almost like another Tom Brady, who, we all kind of remember, not everybody remembers. I know you and I remember back in the day where Drew Bledsoe was the quarterback in New England and was very good and one of the best ones in the league and gets injured against the Jets. Brady comes in and that's the rest. The rest is history. And that's so scary that, you can get Wally pipped like that. That's another old school reference for you scoring at home. But at the same time, now you're talking about a 3-headed monster there where obviously probably Garoppolo was already theoretically the odd man out. But now you have a guy who went from Mr. Irrelevant in a similar vein as Brady to this guy who is taking them to the next level. Now, again, beating up on Seattle again, sure. Now this week coming up, they're going to play the winner of Tampa Bay, Dallas. Barring some upset, they would have to come to Philadelphia to play in the NFC Championship game. To me, that would truly test the mettle of this kid, coming into the link, this crowd and this, this atmosphere and this vibe, albeit a good team that's been led by their defense. It's going to be interesting. I think San Fran's got a lot in the offseason, regardless of the outcome of their season to really look at. And it's all based around the quarterback position.
Yeah, this is going to be a fun offseason to watch. I do think Garoppolo, this is his last year. I know they were trying to trade him. I believe this is the last year in his contract. So they can just let him go at this point without any, cap considerations or anything like that. But yeah, between Purdy and Trey Lance, I mean, there's going to be a lot of fans, and I know fans don't run the organization, but there's going to be a lot of fans in San Francisco that want Purdy to stay the quarterback of this team. But how do you do that when you invested, not just the third overall pick, but everything you basically traded to get to that third overall pick?
Yeah, that's the investment. Yeah, right. And all the Trey Lance stands that, especially the fans, fantasy-wise and otherwise, that saw all that potential and swore, up and down, he's our guy. Mm-hmm. Now, yeah, like it's going to be interesting to see who stays on that fence, or, you're going to have a fan civil war probably amongst the Niners, when it comes to quarterback. But, hey, let them fight it out. That's fine. We have our guy here, and we're doing just fine.
All right, let's move on. We've also talked about the Jacksonville Chargers game. Jacksonville ended up winning that one 31-30 with the last-second field goal. They erased a 27-point deficit like we talked about. They were down 27-0 in the second quarter before they scored that first touchdown. Trevor Lawrence, like we said, 4 interceptions in the first half, 4 touchdowns in the second half. And Asante Samuel Jr., who had maybe a half of all time for a defensive back. I mean, in the playoffs, 3 interceptions in one half is incredible. And I feel like that accomplishment is kind of getting swept under the rug because of the fact that, Jacksonville came back and won that game. And now sort of everything is, what a great call by Doug, and, what a great comeback and what a great turnaround by Trevor Lawrence, instead of what a great game from Asante Samuel Jr. and, basically carrying this defense to a victory. And it's unfortunate for him, but, very fortunate for Jacksonville fans and Jacksonville team, obviously, and good for us. I mean, at least I can speak for myself here. I'm glad to see Doug Peterson moving on. Love the guy, obviously, helping our Eagles win a championship, the first Super Bowl ever. He's just going to be one of my favorite coaches ever. And I actually posted on Twitter after this game that this game was won by the coaching staff. You don't go into halftime down, 20 points or 23 points, something like that, and turn things around the way you do. And make he just made the right call at the right time, it seemed every single time. And it was the coaching matters in the pros. It absolutely does. And Doug Peterson proved that. Yeah, no,
I agree. To say the same thing, in the same vein, I know you kind of saw me throw that out, was, how many coaches actually have a statue of them, when you really think about it. Now, again, we wear our hearts on our sleeve in this area, and that first Super Bowl for the Philadelphia Eagles was always going to be legendary. But the way that went down from, basically the second quarter of the Minnesota Vikings conference championship, and then throughout the entire Super Bowl, where it was just, everybody, he was in the zone calling plays. Nick Foles was in the zone. Well, everything was the perfect storm. And like you're saying, it does show that you can take a young team at halftime that just had one of the worst halves of football and could totally turtle up and just let them know, hey guys, we got 30 more minutes. It's okay. We got this. And they did. I mean, and when you look at some of the team stats from the game, it's kind of scary. The irony that Jacksonville won it at the buzzer on a game-winning field goal. They ran just one more play at the end of the game. You have 5 turnovers in a game and win. It's totally, you gave up 5 more minutes in time of possession. Everything kind of led to certain things, and that was what was amazing, was to see how this young quarterback, and I know you and I have talked throughout the fantasy season and last year how people thought he was going to be a bust, and then you kind of attribute it to the coaching staff that was there his rookie season, and how they turned him around quick and put some weapons around him so that he could develop. And I know Ross Tucker threw out a tweet. To this day, Trevor Lawrence has still never lost a game on a Saturday. It's so no, it's a total truth. It's so amazing that they were able to pull this off. And I do feel bad for
So wait, Justin, are they playing Saturday next week? Oh, I got to pick them to upset the Chiefs now.
I think that's a possibility. So I may have to ride or die with my guy. But no, I was kind of liking him coming into the year. And for Justin Herbert and that team, it's just, he's got to get some better coaching on his side. And it's not so much his fault. Guy had a pretty good game. Eckler had a decent game. they didn't run the football, and then they played the prevent, and they just kind of mailed it in and kind of thing. They thought this team was going to quit, and they didn't. And again, that is the coaching, like you said. You have some of these young, hot commodity coaches that come in, and they light the world on fire because they were a good coordinator for a team that they come from. And it doesn't always translate. We have a guy, Nick Sirianni in Philadelphia, that people thought was a joke, and turn around and, pound for pound, you were the best team in football at certain points and the NFC throughout. I know San Fran, Buffalo, Cincinnati, Kansas City are all in that conversation. But you look at a guy who choked his way out of the playoffs last year and choked in the first round this year. You're going to get 3 strikes and you're out. Maybe even not that far.
Yeah, I honestly wasn't even thinking about last year, but you're right. That timeout that cost him a playoff berth last year. And
that's the calls, like you're saying, where Doug, he can read the game. He wasn't a great quarterback, but it's just like certain players in sports that manage teams after the fact. They may not have been as skilled as others, but they know the game. They know they can read that field. They know what the other coach is, and they're just able to pull it off.
Yeah, usually it's the middle of the road sort of mediocre players that make the best coaches, because those are the guys who, truly have to understand the game to be good enough. Like, some guys just have so much natural ability that they really don't have to understand much. They can just go out and do, and they can perform, and they're great. And those players tend to not make very good coaches because they've never really had to, rely on the intellectual part of the game, especially in football. And I think you're right. I think Doug Peterson, being a quarterback and understanding, the offense so well, that he has a knack, like you said, for these play calls, and he kills it. But let's move on to the Miami-Buffalo game. Buffalo wins this one 34-31. For me, the big story in this was Buffalo holding Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle to a total of 10 catches for 113 yards, no touchdowns on 22 targets. I mean, if you look, Stephon Diggs and Gabe Davis both individually had better games than Hill and Waddle combined. Diggs was 7 for 114, and Davis was 6 for 113 with a touchdown. So this was just a matter of the Bills' offense just doing more. Miami hung in this one with Skylar Thompson, a third-string quarterback, starting for them, which I was impressed by. Honestly, I think that the team as a whole played very well. Buffalo's they have too much firepower. I mean, they have playmakers all over the place, and when Josh Allen can't get the ball to those playmakers, he becomes one himself and just takes off with the ball. And, he's a gigantic 6'5", 240-pound man who, runs a 4.7. Yeah. So it's like, I mean, how do you defend the Buffalo Bills, honestly? I mean, Miami did their best, put 31 points on the board, trying to keep up with them. But I mean, the way to beat Buffalo is you're going to have to outscore them. And Miami just, without Tua, didn't have that firepower. So tough loss for them. But I think they are in a good spot for years to come. And I think that you're going to see Miami knocking on the door of the playoffs for the next probably 4 or 5 years at least.
Yeah, I mean, it seemed like, and again, that was one where I really was busy, but I did get like a chance to see a couple seconds there, and looking at the score where, Miami was holding them, their defense was doing okay. And it seems like maybe Buffalo was a little bit out of sync, throughout different parts of that game where Miami was winning. It wasn't like they were, clawing back in the game or were hanging around. And then it looked like Buffalo kind of put the sword to them. And then I'm walking by and they're down 3, and it was only a couple bad, play calls, by the coach, with maybe not the whole thing with the 4th down and not realizing they didn't get it. And that timing, and you lost stuff there where, again, it's a young coach and a young team. But to me, that the thing that kind of glares, and I know it's that third time's a charm matchup, but that Buffalo, like when you really went and looked at what they had, weapons wise, and that's what Josh Allen, I think, what makes him so good, but also makes him mortal at the same time, where if he's not doing almost everything at times, like Stephon Diggs, we know is one of the top wide receivers in the league. Gabe Davis was coming in with a lot of hype. Now, he did have a big game. He's been known to drop some balls and not have one. You had a rookie, Khalil Shakir, who stepped up and made some big plays. Cole Beasley, who went from retired to not retired to retired to not retired again. He's
Brett
back.
Favre plan.
Yeah, why not? And again, Dawson Knox, like you have some guys around him. The running game, again, I still feel like Devin Singletary doesn't get enough carries and respect for what he can do. Again, he's not elite, but he's a good running back. And the way they call their plays, they just don't do it. Yeah, like you said, Skylar Thompson on the other side of the ball was, Christ, he threw the ball 45 times, trying to keep them in the game and really just threw a couple picks. Outside of that, it was the defense of Miami that kind of kept them in the game a little bit. They were trying to play keep away. They couldn't do it. And at the end of the day, too, the penalties and everything else rags them. But I think you kind of saw Buffalo look a little bit mortal, almost maybe like they were looking ahead, trap game concept. Even in the playoffs, it does happen. Obviously, the seeding was all jumbled up because of the thing that took place with DeMar on the Monday night game and all the tiebreaker things. So, I think it did throw some of these teams for a loop because it was so late in the season. We'll see. I don't feel too strong about Buffalo. And as you know, they have been known to choke in the playoffs in the past. So we'll see how they go.
The next game was the New York Giants at the Minnesota Vikings. Giants end up winning this one 31-24, which you and I both called. The underdog, the away team coming in, the 6 seed winning at the 3 seed Minnesota. We both had this one correct. I think for this, the game did not go the way I expected. I didn't expect the Giants to score 31 points. I thought that they would have to win this game on the back of their defense. But honestly, Daniel Jones played the best game I think I've ever seen him play in the biggest pressure cooker that he's ever been in. He ended up 24 of 35 for 301 yards, 2 touchdowns, no picks, no fumbles. I mean, being Eagles fans here, we remember Daniel Jones as the guy who, basically just he turns the ball over like it's, like he's changing the sheets at a Holiday Inn Express. Like he was constantly fumbling the ball. He led the league in fumbles, I think, 2 years in a row. He was really bad. And I think this was his last year as a starter for the Giants if he didn't step up, but he absolutely did. Daniel Jones also went 17 for 78 on the ground, and Saquon Barkley had a really good game as well. He went 9 for 53 with 2 touchdowns, also 5 receptions on 6 targets for 56 yards. Isaiah Hodgins had a good game, 9 targets, 8 receptions for 105 and 1. And, it was just an all-around good performance by the Giants. And it wasn't like the Vikings played bad. I mean, Cousins had a good game. TJ Hawkinson had a good game. Jefferson, he kind of has pulled a disappearing act a few times this year. And unfortunately, I don't want to say disappearing act like he just didn't show up for the game. Every time Minnesota dropped back to throw the ball, the Giants had, 2 guys on Jefferson. They were not going to let Justin Jefferson beat them. And I do respect, again, good coaching. Keep their best player from beating you and make someone else beat you. And that's sort of what they did. And another player couldn't beat them. So hats off to the Giants. They get to come to Philadelphia next week and play the Eagles for yet another third time's a charm game in Philadelphia. But I'm actually, I'm as much of, I don't want to see NFC East teams win. I do feel a sense of pride when our division and, if this Dallas-Tampa Bay game goes away, I think it's going to go, and Dallas wins this one. 3 of the final 4 NFC teams are going to be NFC East teams. And, it does make me feel like there was a lot of talk earlier in the year about the Eagles' record being a little bit hollow because they hadn't beat anybody and this and that. Listen, they beat the Giants twice. They beat the Cowboys once. And those are, potentially 2 of the other 3 teams left in the playoffs at the end. So, it just does make me feel a little bit stronger about these Eagles wins going and beating these teams that, maybe some people thought were bad teams, but are not, obviously. I mean, obviously the Giants are a solid team and, they're a little scary, honestly. I mean, they played the Eagles well in week 18 without most of their starters in the game. And the Eagles are going to have to be on their A game to win this one against the Giants this week.
Relax. Just relax. Calm down. First of all, yes, you and I both had this game pegged, albeit, wasn't maybe expecting the scoring to be quite as high, maybe especially on the Giants end. But we did see this one coming from miles away. And again, we do have a little bit of an inside track on teams out of the NFC East because we get to see them a lot. We follow them a lot. We hear the news because of matchups involving, again, our hometown Eagles. The biggest thing is that, and Pat, this is an old expression, and if nobody knows it and they want to blow it off, that's fine. And probably this is why you're also quaking at the juggernaut that is the San Francisco 49ers, that defense wins championships. Well, defense lost this game 100%. The Minnesota Vikings suck on defense so bad throughout the regular season. They were top 3 worst. They give up too many yards. They give up too many points, to the point where they gave up an average of 25 points a game. Their offense scored an average of 25 points a game. Again, their point differential was -3 for a 13-win team. You were like Neo from the Matrix. You were dodging every bullet throughout the season. And yeah, you had that big win over Buffalo that was just one of the most random accidents to happen. Again, it's the offense good. And I know you just touched on Justin Jefferson too, where everybody has him pegged to be the next greatest of all time, top 5. He's already in there. I'm sure some people have him on the list. Well, he's all time now. He's all time. He's an immature player that can get taken out of games easily at times, and he does it to himself. And when there's tough physical coverage, when he gets to go his own route and do his own thing, and teams can't play tough on him and they don't make it a point to key on him, that's when he falls apart. You saw Green Bay do it to him a couple weeks back, to the point where he hit the referee with his helmet. He was so pissed off. And you can take him out of a game. And I think if teams start to realize that that is possible, and he's going to be frustrated too when he knows that no matter how much he does, if he puts up 15 catches for 226 and 4 touchdowns, his team's still going to lose by a touchdown because his defense can't do anything. So again, yes, hats off to the Giants. They were the better team all around. And they're not a complete team. They're a team that was 9-7-1. That had, really, really big swings when it came to stuff on offense and defense. And to see their team play that well, like you're saying, Daniel Jones going off on that team, while not taking away. And, we make fun of him, but he is a competent quarterback. Saquon seems healthier. I think they really just feasted on the fact that this team just could not stop them whatsoever. They averaged over 6 yards a play, dominated the football for 33 minutes to 26. I mean, they did everything right. At the end of the day. And that's what, you went into Minnesota, you went on the road as a wild card and punched them in the mouth early, and they really never recovered from that. So it is interesting to see, but I think that the bell's about to toll on your favorite team, the Giants there, Pat.
All right. The Baltimore-Cincinnati game was the nightcap. Another good game, another one-score game. For Baltimore, Tyler Huntley went 17 of 29 for 226, threw 2 touchdowns, 1 interception, had a costly fumble, which we're going to talk about in a second here. Mark Andrews, okay game, 5 for 73 on 10 targets, no touchdowns. Jamar Chase was kind of the lone standout, I guess, for Cincinnati. Statistics-wise, 12 targets, 9 receptions, 84 yards, and 1 touchdown. The Bengals really spread the ball around. There wasn't, even with Chase's 84 yards and a touchdown, it wasn't like he was far and away the best player on the team as far as the stats go. It was just one of those games where it was a typical AFC North game. I mean, we hit the under. A lot of defensive stops on both sides of the ball. Joe Burrow only threw for 1 touchdown. Just one of those games where the defense really stepped up, and Cincinnati's defense pulled out the game-winning play on that fumble recovery for a touchdown from, I think it was Hubbard, right? That ran that back. Cincinnati's one of those teams that, I talked about last week, me sleeping on last year, saying I wasn't going to sleep on them again this year. I am not sleeping on them. I think that, they can absolutely beat Buffalo. They can beat Kansas City. They can beat Jacksonville if they have to. I also think they can get beat by all of those teams, obviously. I think that, if Cincinnati comes to play and they play their game, they can beat anybody. But I think that they also showed in this game that they are beatable. And had that Tyler Huntley quarterback sneak gotten 6 inches further and he, that been called a touchdown instead of him fumbling the ball and Cincinnati scoring on that play, we're looking at a completely different game now. Cincinnati has to come back, and score in the final few minutes to tie things up, and then, potential overtime and all that. So, this is definitely a game that the Bengals could have and should have maybe lost, but they do what they need to do to win games on offense and on defense. And they stepped up in this one.
Yeah. I mean, I really do think it was a coin flip. And again, it really just came down to that play. Like, watching a little bit of it, I did get a chance to actually catch a little bit of that one finally. Baltimore kind of, for lack of a better better term, I'm not going to say dominated, but they were the better team in the game for 3.5, 3/4 of the game. And it really just kind of went down to that possession. They were able to keep Burrow and that electric offense under wraps. Again, this third time the charm in a tough division, like we said, the under was there. Everything kind of played into exactly kind of what we thought, albeit maybe that Cincinnati would have been a little more dominant. There were questions about Huntley coming into the game. Was he going to be healthy? And outside of, he did throw an interception, but really it came down to that fumble. I mean, if you go back and look statistically at the game and you just see how they were, and you could hear it, like watching that crowd was quiet in the fourth quarter. And that whole drive was one of those ones where you're like, my God, they're going to go down and score, and they're going to make it a game for Cincinnati to get back into. And it was 3rd and 1 when they made that call. You still had a shot to give it to, you had J.K. Dobbins, who was having a nice little game. He wasn't crushing it per se, but, to the tune of almost 5 yards a carry. Gus Edwards was in there too. Like, you had these guys there ready to go. Heck, give the ball to Mark Andrews or Ricard, the fullback, to make a big burst to get you even closer. And then maybe that play comes down to it. I'll be honest to say, like, I don't dislike Cincinnati. I think they're a good team and I do root for them. But of the two, I prefer Baltimore just because of, my old feelings towards that team and the coach and the way they ran stuff. But yeah, again, talking about coaching, winning and losing playoff games, that was a play. And we've seen Harbaugh be a little too aggressive at times that arguably cost them the game. Because then after that, both teams seemed like they just didn't know what the heck just happened. And, a couple of possessions back and forth. And then that was it. Game was over. And it just came down to one play and one guy making a hell of a return on that. The fact that he made it downfield the way he did without anybody touching him. Mark Andrews, again, you may not have had the greatest game ever, but my God, dude, you ran him down as hard as you could. And there was nobody else near that. That's what I couldn't understand, how they all just stood there and watched. You saw one other guy in the picture, chasing him down, and he just got it like lollygagging around like the 40, almost midfield. It's like, dude, that's the game that's happening right now. Like, you guys even care? Lamar not being there, not even going to the game. I think this team kind of had that attitude of like, we're going to win this game without him. We don't want him, because it sounds like that ship has, run its course too, in that team, in that franchise. And you'll see him sign a big deal with somebody else. Baltimore's proven they can win games without him. And I think they're ready to move on as well.
Yeah, that's something that we're going to get into, I'm sure, in the off season here. We're going to continue to do these podcasts. We're going to go down to once a month after the playoffs, or after the Super Bowl, I should say. But I'm sure that's something that we'll talk about in the off season is some of these contracts and where guys are going to end up. That'll be part of our leading up to the 2023 season. Let's jump into next weekend's matchups before we run out of time. We'll take them in the same order that we did last week. We'll just starting with the first game of the week, which is going to be Jacksonville at Kansas City Saturday at 4:30. Jacksonville is an 8.5-point underdog in this one. The over-under is 51.5. It's really difficult for me to count Jacksonville out of any game. I mean, I know the Chiefs are the number 1 seed. They're one of the best offenses in the league. But the Chiefs, like the Chargers, are not a great defensive team. They've given up a ton of points this year, and they win games by outscoring people. So I do think that the Jags are going to be able to move the ball in this one. I do think that they're going to be able to score some points. Hopefully they don't get themselves into, the type of deficit that they got themselves into this past week. But I do think it's going to be a competitive game. Doug Peterson played for and coached with Andy Reid for a number of years, so they know each other very well. I think it's going to be a hard-fought battle between, two of most up-and-coming quarterbacks in the league. And this is going to be, we have some really, really good games on tap this weekend. And this is honestly, obviously the Eagles are, I'm going to be paying attention to that closely, but this might be my favorite game to watch other than the Giants-Eagles game, because, I love watching Patrick Mahomes. The guy's a magician. I think Trevor Lawrence is becoming just a really good quarterback under Doug Peterson, and I really like Jacksonville to give Kansas City a good game. I don't think they're going to win, but I am going to take Jacksonville with the 8.5 points. I'm going to take the Chiefs to win it, and I'm going with the over, even though it's 51.5. I think, like I said, both of these teams can score. Both of these defenses, Jacksonville's defense is actually a little bit underrated. Had they not been had to be on the field so much in that game versus the Chargers with all those turnovers in the first half, I think they would have played better. They played extremely well in the second half, obviously. I think Jacksonville's defense is better than they get credit for. But I think both of these teams can score and will score. I think it's incredibly hard to stop the Chiefs, so I'm going to take the over in that one as well. So Jacksonville with the points, Chiefs on the money line, and the over of 51.5 for me.
Well, I'm going to stick to my guns. Like I said, I'm not scared of this Kansas City team in a certain sense. Yes, they do score. Pat Mahomes, he could come out in this game and put up 500 yards. He's got that ability. Again, talking about coaching and stuff, obviously Andy Reid gets lauded for, being one of the greatest coaches of all time, finally got a Super Bowl a few years back. But for those of us that do remember previous and even recent times with his Chiefs and that team that sits for a week and doesn't have the momentum coming in versus a team like Jacksonville coming off such an emotional win where, yes, there can be a letdown, but at the same time, and you kind of touched on it, that some slightly underrated defensively, Jacksonville this season has stepped it up. Kansas City basically just tries to outscore you, and that's all that they really sometimes have to do. I'm not saying that this is a stone cold mortal lock at all, but I kind of like Jacksonville a little bit in this game compared to maybe what other people might think. Obviously, the line's creeping up on 9-10 points, and they're going to say, look at what just happened. Again, I think there were some anomalies in that game that really kind of hit. And that was, again, 2 of those 4 picks of Lawrence in the first half, maybe forcing that football a little bit. And that team just, again, it was their first playoff game. Now, is it going to be interesting to see how they do against, again, the pupil against the teacher concept? Yes, with Peterson versus Andy Reid, who's going to know who a little bit better tendency wise and everything. There was a Jacksonville win of 27-17 earlier this year in Week 10. Pat Mahomes went off. The defense kind of got lit up, and that was really it. They did host that game in Kansas City. There's something about it right now where I tend to feel like that momentum might carry them over the top. So I kind of lean, and one reason too, turnover battle through the season, regular season at least. Jacksonville was a +5, Kansas City -3. And they have some younger players that haven't been into the postseason as much or recently. Jerick McKinnon had a great finish to the season. Isaiah Pacheco has been a big part of their team. Those are guys that, maybe has to step up in a big spot and cough that football up at the wrong time. And as we saw last night, we just talked about Baltimore and Cincinnati. It only takes maybe a turnover or 2. I like Jacksonville straight up on the money line. Jacksonville definitely with the spread. And I kind of like the under. I think, again, maybe Kansas City comes out a little cold. Another gets punched in the mouth concept. I like Jacksonville 27-20 to win the game outright.
All right. Sticking with Dougie Fresh. I like it.
It's a Saturday. Got to take T-Law.
All right, moving on to the Saturday night game. That's going to be the New York Giants at the Philadelphia Eagles. The Giants are 7.5-point underdog in this one, and the over-under is 47.5. The hard part isn't picking the winner of this game for me because I do think, and this is not me being a homer, I truly do think that the Eagles are the better team. I think that they're going to win this game. The hard part for me is with that 7.5, the Giants have been close in a lot of their games. I don't think that this spread is indicative of, how good the Giants have been and how well they have been playing, leading up to, obviously that Week 18 game where they rested their starters. But before that, I mean, they were playing some really good football. They, I think they had won 3 out of their last 4. Yeah, again, I'm not including that Eagles game because nobody was playing in that game. But this is going to be, I think, a lot closer of a game than Las Vegas obviously expects it to be. I think that, the Eagles defense is obviously much better than Cincinnati, so it's going to be a little bit more difficult for the Giants to move the ball in this one. But I do think that their defense is going to step up. I do think that Jalen Hurts' shoulder injury could limit him running the ball maybe as much as, we as Eagles fans would like to see. So I think it's going to be a fairly close game. So I'm going to take the Eagles to win this one, but I'm going to take the Giants getting 7.5. I think if the Eagles win, it won't be by more than a touchdown. I do also like the over in this one because as we saw last week, the Giants can move the ball and they can score. And we obviously know the Eagles can score. They're one of the highest scoring teams in the league this year. So I think there's going to be points on both sides, and I like the over in this one of 47.5.
With you in some respects there. Again, looking back, you had a Week 14 blowout in New York, 48-22, and then the Week 18 game where I think a lot of fans here were extremely worried. Jalen doesn't look right, and they were so close in that game, and they weren't even playing their starters. I think it was a combination of everybody just trying to get off the field alive on both sides. Gentleman's agreement, however you want to look at it. Brian Daboll, I think, has definitely established himself as a very good NFL head coach so far this season with what he's had to work with and how he turned that team around. And chances are he's probably going to get, coach of the year, might be second place. But that being said, I just can't go anywhere but Philly all day on the money line, on the spread. I like the under. I think this has a little bit of a slowed down concept. Now, I know you kind of think the Giants, because they put up the points, they're going to start to have a bit of an electric offense. But again, I attribute last week to Minnesota's defense being that bad. Again, they put up 16 points against the Eagles in that final game. And then they had 38 against the Colts, 24-12 or 20 in a win, 22. So they kind of stick around for the most part. They've had some stinkers, and they had a 20-20 tie against the Commanders earlier this year. I think getting to that next level of the playoffs is going to be new ground for this team. Now, granted, I think that's also something that can be said about the Philadelphia Eagles. Last year, there was a very bad loss to Tampa Bay, first playoff game for Jalen Hurts. And I think the quarterback that you saw last year and the one you see this year, albeit maybe not at 100%, is a totally different guy. Again, you have A.J. Brown, you have Devontae Smith, you have Dallas Goedert, Lane Johnson, with the injury that he has that sounded like it was going to be a season ender. Sounds like it's been downplayed now by a lot of local media that he's going to be able to play. He may not be 100%, but you'll definitely take that. And as long as their defense is playing the way that they have been playing throughout the season, I just can't see the Giants escaping. So again, I like Philly money line, Philly spread. I like the under. I think it's a 27-13 Eagles final, and then they will await the winner of that San Fran and to be determined Dallas Tampa Bay game hosting the NFC Championship game on their way to a Super Bowl victory.
Oh, okay. We're already going there. All right.
Oh, yeah. Come on, dude. I'll see you on Broad Street, Pat.
All right. Moving on to the Sunday game. Sunday at 3:00, Cincinnati goes to Buffalo. Now, I thought this was one of the games where this was one of the situations where it would be a neutral site game. I thought, but apparently not. This game is going to be in Buffalo. I thought, because Cincinnati only finished a game behind, that had they won that heads-up game versus Buffalo in Week 18, that they would have home field. They would have had the number 2 seed. So I thought this was one of those neutral site games. Apparently is not. It is in Buffalo. Cincinnati is a 4-point underdog in this one, and the over-under is 50.5. For me, in this game personally, this is going to be a tough game to watch because of what happened, obviously, with DeMar Hamlin. And both of these teams getting together again, obviously, to play each other, it's going to be. I think it's going to be difficult for the players, honestly. But this is a game where, listen, I think I just talked earlier about Cincinnati being able to beat any team. I do think that they have obviously the ability to win this game. I feel like it's Buffalo's year. I've kind of felt like that from the beginning of the season. I felt like it was. Even preseason, I felt Buffalo was going to be in the AFC Championship game this year. I thought it would be in Buffalo, which, because of that Week 18 game, it cannot be now. But the Bills, to me, they almost feel like a team of destiny. And I know that sounds, I'm usually the guy that comes on here with the stats and, this is why this team's going to win. But this is just a gut call for me. I feel like Buffalo's going to win this game. I feel like it's going to be a really, really close game. I'm talking, maybe 1 or 2 points or possibly a field goal to win it at the end. I'm going to take the Bengals with the 4 points because I don't think it's going to be a blowout by any means. But I do like Buffalo in this game, and I like the over because it just seems like every game Buffalo plays in, it hits the over. Like they score points, and as good as their defense has been, earlier in the season, they've given up a lot of points lately. I was actually surprised that they gave up 31 to Miami. Now, 7 of those points were on a defensive touchdown. But, Josh Allen turned the ball over 3 times in that game versus Miami, and he needs to I understand that he wants to go out and make plays, but I think he needs to realize that taking care of the ball is first and foremost, especially in the playoffs. You cannot be turning the ball over more than the other team and winning a lot of playoff games. If Buffalo turns it over more than Cincinnati does in this game, they're going to lose. I can tell you that right now. But I think that that's sort of the message going into next week for Buffalo is protect the ball, take what the defense gives you and try not to overextend plays to the point where we're making bad decisions. And I think that as good of a quarterback as Josh Allen is, he does get to the point sometimes where he's so good, he feels he can make plays that, maybe he shouldn't be trying to make. And so hopefully they don't turn the ball over. I would like to see Buffalo continue on. I'm big fan of Josh Allen, of, just Buffalo in general. I think they have a great fan base. One of our best friends is a Bills fan, so I'd like to see him, see his team continue to advance. So I'm taking Buffalo in this one, but Cincinnati with the points, and I'm going to take the over.
Yeah, nah. I know you're feeling a certain kind of way about Buffalo, and hats off to you out there, Bill. I hope maybe for your sake this could be your year, but I don't think that, again, and I know I just kind of mentioned it, I don't think that they have enough. How should I put it? When they can be taken out of sync a little bit too much, and I just feel like that Cincinnati, if you want to talk about a team that seems like destined, not often do you see the team that won and or lost the Super Bowl from the previous year sometimes turn things right around and come right back guns blazing. Sometimes the repeat champ comes back, they win it. Maybe with we see New England do it. Kansas City recently, they won, they reappeared the next year, and banged up Mahomes. They couldn't quite get it over the top. There's something about this Buffalo team that at times they look amazing. And I mean, right now you're playing a team that's a shell of its former self. You play New England twice a year, and they now own them. They don't have an offense and things like that. I know there's some retribution from last year's playoff loss with the massive shootout that you had between Cincinnati and Buffalo. I don't know if the league wants to make it a thing with Damar Hamlin, to be somehow honored. Now, the chances of him coming out for like a coin toss to try to flip this game, something like that might bring a different feel to the whole field and the game itself. I think Cincinnati just finds a way, man. That quarterback, I know everybody loves Josh Allen, but I almost feel like at times Burrow has the better weapons, but he's also just a guy who kind of gets things done. I mean, last year they had a tough game against a really good Rams defense that won that game for them more than per se the offense did. I like Cincinnati in this game. I like them straight up. I like them with the spread. I like the over. I feel like it's going to be 35-27 Cincy. I think their defense has improved from last year. And I don't know, man. I just something about, the way that they had to kind of scramble and hang on against Miami. And I know it's a division game. I feel like maybe they were looking ahead to whatever matchup this was going to be. They just didn't seem quite themselves and could have lost that game almost quite easily at certain points. So, I mean, I'm probably wrong. I'm not surprised. Cincinnati during the season was a +6 on turnovers. Buffalo was even. So, again, that's something in the playoffs with ball security. And, Josh Allen has another stinker of a start. The offense on the other side of the field isn't Skylar Thompson. It's Joe Burrow and that offense. And if that happens and they get caught in that moment, I think it'll be too much for them to improve on, unfortunately.
Yeah, this is going to be a really good game. The final game of the weekend is going to be either Dallas or Tampa Bay at San Francisco. We do not know at the time of this recording who won that game because the the Dallas Tampa Bay game has not played yet. But Scott and I picked different teams to win that one. I'm on Dallas. Scott is on the Bucks. So what we're going to do for this one is we're not really going to pick the game yet because we don't really know who it is, the spread, the over-under, any of that stuff yet. But we're going to just go ahead and guess the spread if our team wins. I say our team, but the team that we picked. So if Dallas beats Tampa Bay tonight and goes on to play San Francisco next week, I'm going to guess that the line is somewhere around San Francisco -4. I think, it's not quite going to be a touchdown spread, but I don't think that it's going to be, a field goal, either 3.5, 4, somewhere in that neighborhood. And with Dallas, and their offensive weapons, obviously both of these teams have good defenses as well. I think you're going to see a middle of the road over under, because there's a lot, basically when Vegas makes these spreads, they're trying to pick numbers that will get the general public to place money on both sides evenly, 50-50, as close as possible. They're not trying to guess the final score or guess who's going to win by how much or whatever. What they're trying to do is set these lines so that the betting public puts 50% on one team, 50% on the other team, and then that way the books can't lose money. All they do is take 10% of of all the bets, like the way they do. They take the juice. So I do think that with both teams having good defenses, but also having good offenses, I think you're going to see a middle of the road over under for this one. So I'm going to say the over under is going to be 47.5. I'll say for this one, if the Cowboys win tonight and go on to take on San Francisco.
Yeah. Again, Tampa Bay getting by Dallas, I think would be, obviously the home field advantage. And we talked about Brady being undefeated against, the Dallas Cowboys and Dak, and Dak just being a turnover machine. So that's kind of my rationale. If it does end up being Tampa Bay traveling to San Fran, they did it in week 14. That was a big Brock Purdy game where he started off a little rough and ended up just out dueling, so to speak, Tom Brady. But it was a case of San Fran's defense really just shutting down Tampa Bay offensively. And again, I think to beat up on San Fran, just like, they did lose. Their last loss was against Kansas City, who beat them by 20 and was able to kind of just knock them out real quick with putting up points and everything. That game, Tampa Bay had 8 penalties for 62 yards. They turned the football over 3 times. Maybe it could have been a little bit of a closer game. Maybe. I don't think maybes count. Now, a little bit, I know your favorite coach, Todd Bowles, having a second chance. He's a Pat guy. Having a chance to maybe chew on some play calling and film and maybe come up with a plan to try to keep the game close enough. But at the end of the day, I think that San Fran does have that ability to just kind of whack a team that's as bad offensively that just can't put up the points. Tampa Bay averaged 18 points a game. So they were actually and they gave up 21. So they were a losing record, and that was basically a -3 when you actually look at the scoring concepts on that. Nothing really would be in their favor in this game. And I think that San Fran hosting this game and being already the favorite to come out of the NFC, I think they'd be given probably 2 touchdowns. I think it would be about 14 and a half points. And again, kind of playing off of that previous game, I think they would expect maybe an over-under around 40, where it's just a heavy San Fran. Again, it was 35-7, which was a total of 42 last time. I think maybe they would expect something in that realm. Again, maybe Brady doesn't turn it over, converts a couple more, and maybe it's something like 31-17. And again, they show a little life compared to last time, maybe knowing that defense a little bit better.
All right, well, we will put our picks out for this game on Twitter once the game tonight is over and we have an official, like I said, an official spread, an official over-under. Depending on who wins it, we'll put our picks out so that we, anybody who's following the show, who's interested, can go on and check out our picks for next week in the San Francisco, Dallas or Tampa Bay game, whoever it happens to be. But looks like we're about out of time for today. Before we go, just want to throw our socials out there for you again in case you do want to follow us. We are at the 9Route1 and at Scott from Delco on Twitter. Our website is www.the9routeffb.com. We also have an email if you'd like to email the show, the 9routeffb@gmail.com. And before we go, we'd like to thank Mickey's Port of Call Pub in Tuckerton, New Jersey for partnering with the show. If you're looking for a great place to watch the NFL this weekend, Mickey's is it. Great food, drink specials, and all the football you can handle. Mickey's Pub, 327 East Main Street in Tuckerton, New Jersey, where friends and family meet. Thank you, Mickey's, for partnering with us. Any last words before we head out for the day?
Sounds like I'm getting executed there.
What would you like as your last meal?
Oh, man. That's a story for another time, Pat. No, folks, again, we appreciate everybody listening throughout the season, taking some of our picks in the fantasy football side. This is the fantasy gambling side, so to speak, and even to the point where we've created our own lines and we're closer to AC. It's legal there now, so I guess we could say we're our own Atlantic City.
There's a couple of nice sports books that they built in Atlantic City I've seen.
Yeah, I mean, it's gambling's legal just about everywhere. Again, this is for entertainment purposes only. But yeah, we appreciate everybody listening. Follow us on social media. Like and subscribe us, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Podbean, you name it, we're out there. And again, we appreciate the listen. This is fun, so this tends to be a little less serious and a little more just, back and forth, bragging rights, more like our starts and sits. Again, we'll talk to you next week. Enjoy the Dallas Tampa Bay game tonight. We will. You'll be hearing this after the fact, and enjoy those playoff matchups coming up for divisional round. And folks, Super Bowl is around the corner. So, you might want to get those party trays lined up. Mickey's is a great place to look into, whether you enjoy the game there or get some catering done. I'm sure they'd be able to get together a nice big platter, wings, sandwiches, you name it. I'm sure they'd be able to take care of you down there as they do with everybody else in that Tuckerton area. For Pat, I am Scott. We will talk to you next week with the results of the divisional round. Peace.